Hey guys, we're live. Welcome to the Business Intel podcast. We're here to support you in making smarter business decisions. We got four things on the plate today. Number one, we're talking about bums in LA doing things they shouldn't be doing. Number two, we're talking about good showing of damage from carriers. Number three, we're talking Montecito. And number four, we're talking Mammoth. So number one, let's talk bums. So I'm driving in LA and I'm talking to Mario on the phone, and I'm making a left turn onto the left turn onto the freeway. And out of the corner of my eye, on the right caddy corner, I see these white thighs, like muscly thighs. I'm not kidding. This is insane. And then I see these logs of like refuse dropping out of the guy's butt in the center of Los Angeles. He's using a cardboard to kind of direct it into, as it's coming down, direct it into a bucket. I don't want to get any more graphic than that, but my point is, in the middle of one of the most wealthiest cities in the entire world, dudes are defecating on street corner. Mario, your thoughts?
What I've noticed is you go into like a restaurant or a grocery store or a coffee shop, and the bathrooms now are all out of order. So a lot of these restaurants, businesses are just saying like we can't handle the amount of bums coming in here, displaced people. Let me put a better term: people that are currently unhoused. They're coming in there like destroying the bathroom. So I get it. This gentleman had to go, and he just decided to go right in front of you, Warner.
So it brings up a really important point, because this whole podcast is about getting business intel. It's about, building a business, investing in a business, or starting your business. You can enter a business at any point, right? But business is business. There's just different stages, no matter where you are in your business journey. What's really interesting, why we're talking about this kind of stuff, and it seems like why are they talking about defecating on a podcast? It's actually very important, because as you're walking around, if you're a businessman or woman, you want to be assessing the local environment in which you're like sort of operating, to see what's going on, because business it's people. It's just people working together to create something, right, in a community. And as you're walking in these communities, you want to see on the ground intelligence, what's going on. And what that tells me about LA, what I'm seeing, it's a bigger problem where there's a lot of tent cities under bridges. There's a lot of homeless dudes wandering around, and it seems to be getting a lot worse. What is that telling us about that economy in Southern California, one of the greatest economies in the world? That it's crumbling because of too many regulations, taxation, and inflation. And you're seeing it creep out. What does that mean for you as a business individual? Well, you want to start to look at, how will this affect me? Especially if you're a brick and mortar business. You're like, well, you know what? I'm not going to get as many customers because this is going on in this environment. Where else is it spreading? You want to start to be thinking about these things as a business owner, because it impacts your businesses and other businesses. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. Mario, your thoughts?
I stopped by a school in LA Thursday as I was driving up to Big Bear, and there was just homelessness and craziness and bombed out vehicles all around this area I stopped in. And then I got within the bubble of this school, and all of a sudden it just cleared up. And it was, they maintain that there's like a regulation, I think, in Los Angeles County where you can't have a homeless encampment within 500 feet or 500 yards of a school. And there was like a dealership and coffee shops and restaurants. It was like this thriving little bubble. But as soon as you got out of that green zone, it just went crazy.
So what is that pointing to? That's pointing to something we talked about before: without integrity, nothing works. Because integrity is hard work. It's creating agreements. It's coming together in a business environment. Each person is putting their efforts and labor forward to create something great. So when you have individuals, you have certain individuals that are working over here, and then over there you have other individuals that choose not to work. And I've talked to people. I mean, this is a crazy statistic, but I've talked to multiple people that worked in homeless communities, and like 89% of people choose to be homeless. It's a choice. It sounds insane, but I've heard it from various people. So you have people in the schools, let's just say, working hard to create a future for themselves or for these kids they're teaching. And then over in this other sector, you have people that don't want to work. And the reason that's being fostered in California is because they're saying, hey, you can come here and do whatever you want. But in societies where they don't tolerate that type of stuff, you're not going to see that. So that's a very, this whole podcast is about giving you like on the ground intel, what we call signals intel, which is like the internet, and human intel, where you're talking to someone else, things we learn in the military. There's all sorts of different types of intelligence, but just like blindly running your business and then not looking at what's going on around you or over the internet or talking to other people is a huge mistake. Because let's say you want to open up a brick and mortar business, right? The reason we're talking about this, well, you go into these communities and you start looking around, walking around, talking to people, looking to see, hey, is this a great spot to open the business? Okay, so let's roll on to the next one, which is, you know what? I said it was going to be packages number 2, but let's roll to Montecito as number 2. We'll roll packages to number 3.
Okay, about a week ago, I was up in Montecito having a coffee at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I sat down by 3 gentlemen having coffee. And one of them said his guest house has had a tenant in it for 7 months that has refused to pay rent. And he mentioned the amount of rent he collects, or he should have been collecting for 7 months, $35,000 a month to live in this guy's guest house. And he hasn't collected. So $245,000 in back rent for 7 months. And you're like, wow, there's, evictions that are supposed to be happening. I think Montecito is in Santa Barbara County, if I'm correct. So I don't think it's under the same eviction moratorium as Alameda County and LA County. But this gentleman can't get a tenant out of his house for 7 months, and it's at that level of rent, or that, I mean, at the top of the rental market, $35,000 a month. Pretty insane, but it just shows you that that couple or that person living in that guest house is an entrepreneur or a movie star or something that can afford that kind of, that person's probably making north of $100,000 a month, and yet they can't pay their rent, or they're choosing not to pay their rent because of, medical mandates, or something's changed in the economy. So just a data point, even in Montecito, they're experiencing folks that won't pay their rent. What are your thoughts on that, Warner?
So when you hear something like that, like a piece of intel, what you want to do is you want to go, oh, that's interesting. And then you want to see if that intel is happening in other areas. This is what you do as a businessman or woman. You want to see if there's a trend that's starting to develop. And I can tell you that there is, because I was staying in a building in, where was it? Down near Westwood, right on the outskirts, southeast. I won't name the name or the number of the building, but basically one of the property managers was telling me he had to deal with the same thing. I mean, this was like $6,000 a month for a furnished rental, and he had multiple people, wealthy individuals, that weren't paying. So you ask yourself, okay, it's happening here in Montecito. It's happening here. What's happening? What's happening is because of lack of integrity in the laws, good order and discipline is breaking down. And that's an interesting thing, because you want to think about that in terms of the business you're going in. Because if you don't have order and discipline and laws that are followed, how are you going to enter into business arrangements where you're coming together like with a tenant landlord responsibility, and you're putting a service forth and you're expecting them to pay, and now the state or the government's like, well, you don't have to pay. Well, what you're doing is you're damaging the future. I mean, we could go on for hours about what that one simple decision will do to a local community, but what you're doing is you're basically saying, hey, we're not open for business here. We're here to have you, and we have a property in Los Angeles in real estate, so we're working and thinking through this, but you're basically saying we're coming here. If I'm a businessman, I'm going to come here, I'm going to think twice, because I don't know if I'm going to get paid, so I'm going to put before my efforts and labor, and then it's like, well, I'm not going to get paid. That's not a society that works. That's what it tells me. So we're seeing a breakdown in, and we're seeing, it really comes from corruption. We're seeing corruption. We're seeing a breakdown in governments. And now they're saying, hey, you can be a freeloader and do whatever you want. And all that will lead to is financial destruction. And that's why we're talking about this stuff. As you're going along your day, listen to people, talk to people, take a business mindset and look around you in the world. Just don't blindly go out there. Don't get, on the weekends, spend your weekends getting drunk. Spend your weekends walking around early, going to coffee shops, listening to people. You'll get a wealth of information. Let's roll on to number 3, which is
one point.
Go ahead.
One point is just, I think the legal term is consideration, but it's the exchange of services. So a landlord is providing a tenant a roof and a place to come, a place to live in, and the tenant is providing the landlord a payment, usually monthly payment for that piece of property. And there's a push in California for them to cease paying rent. The rent is something that's, or living somewhere is essential. It's an essential service. They shouldn't have to pay. It's like, how would you run a grocery store if people could just enter the grocery store, take what they want, food's essential, and leave? You couldn't run a grocery store, and you can't run a multifamily property, or you can't be a landlord and run a property. So there's going to be less supply. If that's the law, or if that's what's occurring, you're going to get less supply in the economy of places to stay, and the cost to stay somewhere is going to go up because of the risks.
Exactly. Well said. And I saw that when they canceled Airbnb, where you couldn't do nightly rentals, you do monthly rentals. It took a lot of stock off the market. Prices went up. So let's go to number 3. Sorry, there's a blower behind me, so might have to talk over it. But number 3, I've talked to you about this, Mario. I'll let you roll on this because the blower's going. But goods are showing up, multiple goods for our apartment complex that we're redoing. We're redoing 16 units of 20. Multiple things have shown up damaged, like light had a forklift through it. Marble countertops are showing up damaged on vanities, which are like the sinks you'd put in the bathroom. And I've never seen that before. I mean, shipping used to be amazing. It would show up on time. There wouldn't be any issues. What's going on there?
Yeah, so we've had 4 tailwinds on our economy for 40 years. Number 1 is cheap commodities from globalization. So from specifically Russia, East Asia, we've had cheap goods show up that have been guaranteed by the U.S. Navy. We've had free passage of sea lanes secured by the U.S. Navy, part of globalization, and that's ending. That's ceased to end specifically within the last couple of years. Number 2 is we've had cheap labor from China, which is ceasing to end, or cheap labor from Asia, which is ceasing to be cheap. Number 3 is for 40 years, we've had lower interest rates. The Fed's prime rate has gone from 20% to 0%, and now that's recently changed. And number 4 is you've had baby boomers who have been in their peak earning years driving consumption, which are now starting to retire, and they're pulling back on consumption. All those tailwinds have either shifted to being neutral, or now we're experiencing a headwind in our economy. And you're seeing that in shipping. You're seeing that with commodities. You're seeing that with interest rates. You're seeing that with consumption. And you're seeing that with labor costs. Everyone I meet that's a business owner is talking about how much labor is costing nowadays versus when they opened their business either a decade ago or a few years ago. So those are just some headwinds that you're now seeing that specifically in stuff that's showing up from time to damaged, meaning they can't get the product across the ocean anymore without damaging it because they're either rushing it. There's so much demand for shipping that they don't need to take care of the product, and they're still going to get customers. It's a very interesting data point.
Exactly. And one thing to add too is because of our school systems, a lot of people talk about this. We've created, well, it might not just because of our school systems, because some of those products are coming in quad cons that are coming from Asia. But let's just say it's happening in the U.S. A lot of the stuff is getting damaged because the damage to me seems like it comes off the ship, gets in a forklift, and gets rushed out to us. I think you made some great points. Number 1, they're rushing because they don't have enough labor. So guys are like, hey, we got to get this on the truck as fast as possible. There's not enough labor. That guy doesn't want to work. One thing you touched on is this labor. A lot of people don't want to work anymore because what's happening is we've had such low interest rates. We're used to this lifestyle. And now that the cat's out of the bag, inflation's taking off, people can't afford to live. So they're like, man, $22 an hour. Who cares? What am I, $22, $30 a box. I'll just throw this damn thing on, get my job done with. I'm not getting paid. I'm not going to go home. I'm not making enough money for retirement. I'm screwed. I'm just going to play Minecraft or Warcraft, whatever the heck that game is called. And what you're seeing is deterioration in the quality of the labor force. And I'm seeing it. I was talking to a guy named Fred who does concrete polishing in LA. And he's telling me he's got 3 crews. He's been running for a while. And he's like, I can't find, if I need to take on more work beyond those 3 crews, I can't find anyone. I'm like, what do you mean anyone? Like no one's zero. I can't find anyone to come work for me because the quality he's getting, these guys are putting out a certain level of quality. When you're in a shipping industry, you can kind of get away with damaging something because there's insurance. No one knows who did it. But when you're providing a service direct to a client like concrete polishing services, and you built up 10 to 15 years of your reputation, you can't just throw any dude at another job who's gonna diminish the quality of your work. So that's what we're dealing with, deterioration in the labor force. So let's roll to the last one, which is Mammoth Lakes, California. What'd you see up there on the ground?
I was up there for a hunting trip, and I saw a boom in construction. So I saw some bad signs up there. The mid range restaurants, there was a lot of restaurants closed in a mid range. There was a few high end restaurants that looked like they were doing well, and there was like fast casual, think Chipotle, they were doing fine. And there was this mid section of restaurants that were all boarded up. They were closed. They looked like they hadn't been open for years. But what I saw was construction, specifically single family houses in that $5 to $10 million range. Neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood I looked at, golf courses, ski in, ski out, mountain views, lakefront. There was tons and tons of construction happening in that $5 to $10 million range. Anything below that, 2, 3, 1 to 3 million, 4 million, nothing, zero. And also zero in like the low end, like let's say affordable housing, zero construction. But there was a real boom, or there is a real boom happening up there in high-end construction, which tells me those are all cash transactions. They've either owned the lot for a lot of years, now they're developing it, or they came in there. They're agnostic towards interest rates because they're paying for that property in cash. The construction crews were all extremely professional. I saw construction crews from Nevada coming in there, brand new trucks, good-looking crews, brand new equipment, and they looked like they did not lack funding for their construction crews. They're working from sun up to sundown, so overtime, paying overtime. They're working on Saturdays and Sundays, so it looks like they had great funding from the property owners that were building those houses. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, great point. So we're talking about all these different things: shipping, homeless, Montecito, people not paying their rent. And you're like, well, what do all of these things have to do with anything? Well, an economy is an interconnected network, right? And the reason we're sharing this with you is this whole podcast is designed to support you in making better business decisions. And what it's telling us, if you put it all together, this is why it's important. We learned this in the military, even though I was a pilot, he was an infantry officer. Intel is one of your most important things because it helps you make decisions. Intel on the safety of your aircraft. Hey, what's working, what's not working with the aircraft? Intel on the enemy, intel on your guys in your company. How are they doing? Are they doing well? Is this guy having issues at home? All that stuff comes together to help you make better decisions in the military and in the civilian world. And what is all this telling us? If you're paying attention, that's what we're saying, pay attention, is the economy is crumbling. Because I'm seeing boarded up shops just driving here today, all down Wilshire Boulevard. I mean, lease sign after lease. I never saw that before. Lease sign. So what that's saying is the economy is deleveraging quickly, and businesses that are not able to survive on a revolving debt because the price of the debt is going up are going out of business. What's that doing? It's impacting the labor market. Inflation is impacting it's eroding people's mental ability and their purchasing power. So all these things are working. And if you're a business person, you go, if I own a business, maybe I should cut back. Maybe I should stack cash. Maybe I should stack cash because I want to buy some stocks because they made cheap prices, or bonds when they go cheap prices. This is why it's important to think about all this stuff, to get on the ground, continually talk. This is what Mara and I are doing. This is what we're sharing with you. So
Intel, just to jump in here, where Intel drives operations. Intel always is the leader. Before you're making a decision, or you're conducting an operation, is you're developing the picture on the ground of what is the intel telling us to do. It's driving your decision-making process. It's driving your actions.
Exactly, and you know that as an infantry officer because it's very important because you're closer to the intel, let's say, than me, who's up in the air. You're like right in front of the intel, the enemy, or whatever you're dealing with. And the enemy literally the enemy could be a bridge or a river you can't get over. It's not necessarily an adversary. So intel and what this whole podcast is about, we've transitioned from it was business, and then it was like leading a leisurely life, and now we've come to our third, which is intel, because we found it's probably one of the most important things, and it's what we know how to do. And it's what Mari and I talk about the most. Hey, what's going on the ground? What are you seeing here? What are you seeing there? So, guys, do you have any final thoughts, Mario? Are you good?
No, I think we can land the plane.
Okay, guys. So, if you want to make smarter business decisions, we're here to support you. Like, comment, subscribe, share this with whoever you think would get value from this. And we appreciate your time, and we look forward to providing you more intel in the future. Thanks so much.